people that were real. You know what? And I say in the book, I needed that. I needed to be fired because I was an arrogant asshole. I ain't gonna tell no lie. You know, yeah, I was an arrogant asshole. I was real good at what I did, and I did not take prisoners. I didn't take any prisoners. I had no excuses for anybody else. You understand what I'm saying?
Was Gene a convincing? Because Timmy seemed to, he had his.
Man, Gene had a personality like a 100-watt bulb. He was, he was personable. He was immaculately dressed. I never seen
everyone talked about that he dressed.
Man, I never seen him in the same clothes 2 days. And and the whole time I've known him, matter of fact, I never seen him wear the same thing in little overnight cases. He just pull up to some spot, the guy bring the case out, put it in the car, boom. We drive on to the next spot. Boom. He just went around and did his collections.
What were you thinking about when that was happening?
I knew he was a drug dealer.
Okay.
Can you tell a story? In your book, you talk about Sade. Now, Sade, UK artist, and you broke Sade in America. So, can you tell that story? Because a lot of people think when they think of Sade now, they think of how big she is, but you were there on the ground floor. Can you share that story? Well,
Sade was the artist that Epic had ended up with she was signed to a custom label in Europe named Portrait. I said in the entire time that I worked for every label, worked for ABC, CBS, Epic, Capital, the whole 9 yards, I always emphasized my name. I always emphasized me instead of the label. Okay. And that has saved me. As much, and people will tell you this, as much as I've been hated, ain't nobody can say, they'll all say, he's a hell of a record man.
You got his book. Hey guys, want to welcome you to another edition of Halftime Chat, and we are excited to invite and interview Mr. T.C. Thompkins, who is a legendary music executive. Actually, he's got some history when it comes to New Jack Swing. So we're going to invite him in. Sheldon's got his book up there, and it'll be great just to be able to talk to Mr. Thompkins about his career and his background. And we'll just see. Yes. So my name is Namdi. I'm out here in England. And that's...
What's your name now?
Namdi.
Namdi?
Yes, Namdi.
Namdi. Okay.
And I've got my friend
who's
Sheldon.
The other gentleman over there?
Sheldon, you want to?
My name is Sheldon. My name is Sheldon Taylor. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well.
So you guys are in London?
No, Sheldon's in Connecticut.
Delaware.
Oh, Delaware.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Delaware. So we got an international thing going on. We got Delaware and London, huh? Okay.
Yes, sir.
It definitely is. It definitely is. We're definitely it's definitely a privilege and an honor to welcome you. We've we have lots of music fans and historians who just enjoy listening and hearing the stories and the journeys. As you can see, Sheldon has your book and everything.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, but we can start as we normally start with all our guests, is just to get a sense of where you were born and raised.
Okay. Well, I was born in Richmond, Virginia, really raised in East Texas. I was raised in Atlanta, Texas, somewhere nobody's never heard of. It's about a population of about 5,000 people. Attended Bishop College in Dallas, served in Vietnam with the 1st Cavalry. And my music history, do you want me to go through that real quick?
Well, no, I think it sometimes it's good to get a picture as to what life was like growing up as a kid back in those days.
Well, I grew up with a real strong Black family. Had a lot of males in my family, even though my mother and father divorced when I was 6 months old. Wow. I was raised by my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. I had 4 uncles, I believe, 4 uncles, and 4 aunts. So I had an Aunt Jewel, which really raised me. That was my aunt, my mother's older sister, really raised me. I spent most of my adolescent with her and my grandparents growing up. My grandfather owned a construction company, which I worked on, and he also owned a farm. So I grew up knowing about hard work. I worked on the farm. I worked in construction with him as a kid. And basically, that was one of the reasons I wanted to get the hell out of East Texas, because I just didn't see my life developing in that area. You know, it just didn't have anything there. I didn't see any opportunities there. That was one of the main reasons why I joined the service and enlisted in the service and went to Vietnam. As soon as I got back from Vietnam, I went to college, met my wife through pen pals
Wow.
while I was in Vietnam. That's how we first met each other. A friend of mine was over there from Mississippi and said he knew this young lady that was the teacher down in Holly Springs. I think it's one of those all Black towns down in Mississippi. She was involved, matter of fact, in the sit-ins. So she was barred from teaching in Memphis. So she had to go to Mississippi to pursue her profession. And we met, fell in love with her. We got married as soon as I got back from Vietnam. About a year after I got back from Vietnam, I went to school. She became pregnant while I was in college. So naturally, I had to drop out of school and get a job.
Wow.
And I was working in the jewelry business as a manager of a jewelry store before I started working at Stax. But music is what I always had desired to be in. Matter of fact, it states in the book that while I was in Vietnam, you know, we were all trying to decide what we were going to do when we got back to the world, what career were we going to pursue. And I just really didn't have any direction. And I say that in the book. In high school, even though I was a great student, you know, to be frank, I just screwed off most of my teenage years running girls and playing ball. Okay. And so while I was there in Vietnam, and only entertainment we really had in Vietnam was Stars and Stripes Radio. And I loved Stars and Stripes Radio, man. And matter of fact, because they played a lot of R&B and Black music, because there was nothing but brothers over there. 75% of the companies were Black.
Why?
You know? So, oh yeah. Yeah.
How come? And I guess why was that?
Well, I mean, it was just a lot of Black guys had joined, I guess, to get out of poverty. And then you had the draft, you know. So, but the majority of the infantry and the fighting men in Vietnam were Black.
Wow.
Yeah. So I spent 11 months and 28 days over there, got back. And like I said, I spoke it into existence when everybody asked me what I wanted to do when I was in Vietnam. I said, I love to be in the music business. That would be a dream come true for me, to get in the music business, not having any idea what the music business was or how you would get into it or anything. I just loved the creativity that music brought about and the passion that it brought out in people. And I wanted to be involved in that. And just so happened, married a young lady from Memphis, Tennessee, moved to Memphis, and finally got me a job with Stax Records, started working for Stax, worked for Stax about a year, then went to work for Capitol, worked for Capitol twice, and worked with Natalie Cole and Mays while I was at Capitol.
Oh, okay. So we don't skip along too quickly though.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
well, I also met a lot of guys at Stax, but you know, I don't really take any credit for anything in Stax because I was green as grass, didn't know what I was doing, you know. But Stax was like a community situation, and you know, I was messed around and hung out with the Barcades, Isaac Hayes, David Porter, those type of guys. It was just all in the neighborhood, you know. And after I left Stax, though, it's when I really got involved in the industry and started learning what I'm supposed to be doing as a record promotion and marketing person.
Okay. Mr. Thompkins, I want to just step in for a second, because a lot of our listeners, their point of reference for music kind of goes back. It's a streaming, but then their point of reference also goes back to music of the 1990s, when you saw an influx of young people coming into the music business as a result of the major labels establishing joint ventures and partnerships with these young artists. But what our listeners need to know is that before the 1990s and the early 2000s, before the Jay-Z's and the Puffies, you came into the music business at the time when the Black record executives were just starting to actually come in as a result of those relationships, specifically CBS needing a lot of record labels like CBS, which we know now is Sony. They didn't know how to market Black music, so they need to have Black executives, Black promotion people, Black everything to really push.
Well, you know, back then, and as I stated in the book, when I first came to CBS, and it was after the 60s, the 70s and stuff, you know, all major record companies were trying to get into the Black business. There were only a few that were already in it, like Motown and Atlantic, and you know, King Records and James Brown's label, Brunswick. All of those labels out of Chicago and those areas like that, Chess, that were smaller Black labels that major companies were basically buying up. That's basically what CBS did, because Columbia actually was the label that had 90% of the Black acts. When I first came to CBS, Columbia had Johnny Taylor, Tyrone Davis, Herbie Hancock, Stanley Clarke, Cheryl Lynn, Earth, Wind and Fire, Denise Williams, Marlena Shaw, George Duke. It was just, they had tons of Black artists.
Teddy Pendergrass.
Teddy was not on Columbia. Teddy was not on Columbia. Now, see, that makes the point what I was trying to emphasize. Back then, Epic wasn't really a Black label. Okay. Epic had a lot of associated labels that supplied them with their Black material. Okay. They had Phil International, which was Gamble and Huff. They had Taboo, which was Clarence Avant. They had what label they had? They had Uncle Funky. Matter of fact, George Clinton had a label over there.
Uncle Jam's Army, Uncle Jam. Yeah.
Yeah. So they brought most of their artists in through associated label. Most of their Black acts were on associated labels. It was only when I took over in '78 that they really truly became a Black label with the acquisition of Michael and the Jacksons. Okay, Michael Jacksons and the Jacksons were signed by Epic Records by Larkin on, really, back in those days. And Larkin also signed Luther Vandross. He also signed Tina Marie and Marvin Gaye. But Marvin Gaye was signed to Columbia. But Epic got Luther, Tina Marie, the Jacksons, and Michael. We got the better of the deal. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listening to all this, I mean, I think, you know, you're talking about the legends of the music industry, but I'm really surprised that you're coming out of Vietnam and thinking, I want to get into the business. I mean, was Barry Gordy an inspiration? Or, I mean, who do you see in the business?
At that point in my life, man, I don't think I even knew about the accliments of Barry Gordy and all those people. I knew the story of Motown, you know, and them being a big successful Black label. I never thought of it as a person, as an executive. I only dealt with it as far as a music aspect. It was really the music. It wasn't any individual at any company that inspired me or anything of that nature. I was inspired by the material, okay? That's what inspired me to get into the industry. It wasn't that there was somebody else Black that was doing it. It wasn't anything of that nature. It was just just straight up totally for the love of the creativity of music. That was it. I didn't know a soul in the industry. Okay. I went in with a business background,
Okay.
and working on a business degree when I went out of college. And I was really more of a salesperson with a drive, because I had run several sales operations, like managing jewelry stores. And I tell anybody, if you can sell jewelry to a person, you can sell anything, because there's nothing about jewelry that is a necessity. Okay. But it was just my desire to be around that creativity. I used to go over to Stax because my wife was the first person who got a job in the music industry, as quiet as it's kept. She was the tape librarian for Stax Records. Now, for your listeners who don't know what that is, back in the days when we had analog, all music was recorded on big wide recording reels, like a giant cassette. And so they had reel to reels, what they call them. You know, when you get the book, you'll have all the definitions of all these terms in the book, because I know my editor was telling me, I was talking about the book and talking about rack jobbers and 45s and 7 inches and things. And these are terms that young people don't know nothing about. I mean, they don't know nothing about 45s.
Pro Tools.
You know, or wax, or anything of that nature. And that's one of the reasons why I was writing the book. And another reason was that we had such a hot streak and had accomplished so much during that era, that it needed to be noted that a Black person ran that division and made that happen. Because if you go back and look at Wikipedia or any of the notable history-keeping things about that era and things that happened in the music industry, you don't hear anything about any of the Black people that were involved in it. You know, matter of fact, when I read up on it, trying to do research on before I did the book, the one thing that I could find about that era was Frank DeLeo. Now, Frank DeLeo was the vice president of Pop Promotions. But Frank DeLeo had nothing to do with Sade, Luther Vandross, Tina Marie, Mtume, Isley Brothers, OJs, all of the other Black hits that we had. So, I always like to bring the fact up is that 98% of the income, or 98% of the revenue that was created during that period were created through Black artists. Michael Jackson made Epic Records. You cannot underestimate the profound effect that release had upon the whole industry. Because
which one was that? Off the Wall, or which one?
Off the Wall was the beginning of it, but Thriller just gave the music industry a rebirth.
Wow.
You got to realize when you have something that is released of that magnetism, and you have to realize that, see, back in the day when people will never understand, major releases like that drew traffic, okay? And I mean that in the way that the Tower Records and Peaches and all the other major retail outlets that sell music material, they needed something to excite their consumer to bring them into the store. When you have a release of the magnetism of Thriller, it, as they say, success rate, high tides raid all boat. That project sold tons of other projects by people being in that environment and buying that material. So he gave the industry a rebirth.
Can you, it's a story in your book you talk about, even though when Michael Jackson first came to Epic, all the way up into Thriller, he wasn't really received like a star. So where when the music was putting,
he was received as a star. Now everybody knew that when the signing of Epic, signing of the Jacksons, what it could be. Okay. I think they saw the possibilities of what it could be. Nobody could possibly have seen what happened though. You know, it would no, it's just nothing in the world that could have prepared anyone for Thriller. But the Jacksons were not a hot act when they signed to Epic. They were an act that was going through a change in demographics. They used to be a kids group. They were becoming young men, okay? The demographics had changed, the type of music they were doing changed, and they had to find their niche. They did 4 or 5 projects at Epic. First project they did was Going Places with Gamble and Huff. You know, and for Epic to turn the Jacksons over to Gamble and Huff shows desperation. You know what I'm saying? It shows desperation because that was the only major Black producers that they had a relationship with that they figured they could give the Jacksons to, and they'd give them a hit. Didn't happen. It was an okay album, but wasn't a hit album. So they did 3 or 4 other projects: Destiny, Dynasty, Victory, and Victory album was what they did the tour on. That tour reignited the public's interest in the Jacksons. Then he dropped Off the Wall, which sold about 3 or 4 millions. And then that's when the label really started stepping up.
Well, that's Destiny was the breakthrough. So Destiny was the year before Off the Wall. And that's the one. Victory was later. Victory was later. Victory was 84. So right. Destiny was 78. So like you said, that reignited them. But then you talk about
reignited them. And then he did Off the Wall in 78 or 79. I think it was 79. So I mean, that started the whole thing rolling for the Jacksons and Michael. And Michael, as I say in the book, Michael didn't really want to go on that Victory tour, but he did it for his family. You know, his primary interest in coming to Epic was to do a solo project.
Can you share the story where when Thriller was released, you talk about it in your book, is that before all of the big hits, the Beat It and the Billie Jean came out, what Epic wanted to do, they released the Paul McCartney duet first. Yeah. Can you share that story? Well,
I hated that. I hated the whole process. Okay. Epic was nervous on Off the Wall. Okay. They were under pressure because Yetnikoff, which was the president of CBS, personally had made commitments to Michael Jackson. And Epic had to produce, you know, so everybody was on the spot. I mean, I remember that because that was the first major marketing meeting where Bruce Lambaugh and all the major players for CBS had attended. So that was on the first release of Off the Wall. That album and Thriller, I had made commitments on. Like I say in the book, I had told Epic that we were going to run this up to #1 in 4 weeks, which we did. And I was somewhat concerned, especially with Thriller, is that after Off the Wall, the magnetism of Michael started coming through, and Epic started taking him more as a pop artist instead of a Black artist. And I was a little offended with that. So I met with Michael. Matter of fact, there's a picture in the book with me and him and Joe. That was prior to the release of Thriller, that I met with him and explained to him how I felt how important it was that his representation in Black media and Black radio would be just as strong as it was at pop radio. He agreed. I mean, Michael was very savvy. You know, a lot of people didn't realize how savvy Michael was, and Michael realized he was a Black man. And yeah, he did definitely realize he was a Black man, and he recognized the racism of the industry and everything. We used to have a lot of heavy conversations about that whole situation and how he tried to balance it. You know what I'm saying? And it's a balancing act.
I think the question we have is, because you leave Stax Records, what is it that you learned at Stax that when you did get to CBS Columbia, that's the experience?
I'll be truthful with Stax, didn't learn me shit. Okay. Only thing that Stax did for me is I just had a chance to hang around with some great musicians, hang around in the studio, hung out with Albert King when he cross-cut Saw. I will always remember that. I was in the studio when he did that. Used to hang out with Isaac and the Barcades, Tim Prees, all those guys used to hang out there. I worked one project. I met Richard Pryor while I was at Stax. That was the one great thing about being at Stax, because Stax was distributing a record by Richard Pryor called That End Is Crazy. So that's how I met Richard. But I learned the meat and potatoes of being in the music industry at Capitol Records. Okay. Me being at Stax was just a blessing. Okay. And I did learn something. One person I can't not take away from my man, Dave Clark. When I was at Stax Records, I met Dave Clark. Dave Clark was one of the oldest promotion men in the industry, and he did give me some key advice and worked with me on developing what I needed to develop to become a great promotion person. He emphasized to me, because back in those days, it was small little houses. Radio stations used to be on the side of the road and little small houses. It was like a shotgun house. I mean the biggest ones with the major signal in the whole 9 yards. They would be an antenna, a major antenna, and a house sitting next to it. So my first thing that Dave Clark used to tell me all the time is to stop at every antenna. I used to stop at every radio station I'd see. I wouldn't care if it was country, gospel, blues, whatever it was. I'd go in there, introduce myself, and present them with my product.
One of the things that I would say 95% of the guests I interview, and they're the artists, it seems as if it was stacked against them as Black artists, the business side, understand the business side. For yourself being hired within the industry, are you quickly brought abreast as to how the business side of the industry works and points and publishing and everything?
Yeah.
But then also, how the labels seem to say, is data at the least they know, we take as much as we can? Or was there any conflict within you?
Absolutely. Well, that is going to go on forever. It ain't like it was happening back then, and it's not happening now. I advise any artist doing any kind of agreement, don't do nothing without an attorney, And a lot of artists used to think that the label was representing them, and the label would present them with an agreement, and they'd sign it without any legal, advice. They put a check in front of them. We're going to give you 30,000. We're going to give you 50,000, 200,000, whatever the number is. But that is nothing but a loan. And people got to realize, artists seem to start realizing that all those advances are nothing but a loan. Unless your contract says non-recoupable, okay? Every penny that you get from a record company is a loan. That's what they are, a bank. Record companies are a bank with a marketing staff.
But did you, and I do wonder, seeing that side, did you ever feel for the young Black artists that were coming through and thinking, guys, let's pull you aside and help you out? Or wait, once you're on the side of the... I
wish I could sit here and lie to you and tell you that I stopped a lot of artists from signing contracts. But when artists would come to me, they would already be signed.
Okay.
I have never met with an artist during my whole entire career until after CBS, after working with major labels and starting to work independent and stuff. I never had to deal with contracts. Okay. When an artist would bring material to me, my job would be to decide what would be the best single to release, the best packaging, the best marketing program, the best advertisement program. and that sort of thing. I was never involved with the negotiations of an agreement other than my own. Okay, but don't let it be thought that Black artists are the only ones that gets taken advantage of. Anyone that does not have anyone too anxious to get a deal, definitely going to be taken advantage of, no matter what you color.
But then when you think about when you joined, I mean, you're thinking about the 60s, 70s. Mm-hmm. Was it a little bit more fair than it was, say, in the 90s? Because a lot of the artists seem to have better income streams then, but compared to the 90s, was it a little bit more fair?
Oh no, it wasn't no more fair. Artists that had their own labels and had worked out percentages with major labels had a decent deal. You know, but any artist signed to them were getting screwed. You know, I mean, do you remember how much money TLC was getting paid?
Yeah.
Okay, they were signed to a Black label. Do you remember how much money Toni Braxton was getting paid? She was signed to a Black label. So it's not the fact that the white man is standing over here taking advantage of Black artists. People take advantage of people, period. Okay? If you're not intelligent enough to know what you're doing, get somebody that is. Okay? That portion of the industry, it'll never go away. You know, they always talk about how payola was this and payola was that. Payola and bad contracts, same thing. A friend of mine told me the guy that was vice president of Motown, when I first got in the industry, started working around with some of the guys who really knew the game. He used to tell me, he said, man, they're going to tell you that they're going to, payola's going to do this, payola's going to do that, blah, blah, blah. He said, they'll never get rid of payola. And they haven't. I've been in the industry 50 years. They haven't gotten rid of payola. Have they gotten rid of Congress taking money or the Senate taking money? You know, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. So corruption is evident everywhere. It just depends on the degree of corruption.
Wow. And then I think the other thing that the questions we were getting was that a lot of the times that the mob were seen as the ones who were running the labels. Mm-hmm. And then when our sort of Black executives moved in, like the Dick Griffin and Gene Griffin, they realized you had to be.
You pulled out some real crooks. You go give me some better examples. Gerald Busby, Skip Cheatham, or someone, not Skip Cheatham, Skip Dillard, let me see who else in
Bill Underwood.
No, not Bill. No, man, my God, man, you really, Bill's a nice guy now. I love Bill. Me and Bill are big friends. Dick Griffin was a crook. Okay. Gene Griffin was a crook. I worked for both of them. And I got screwed by both of them.
Now, before we get to that, because we definitely want to talk about that, because you're coming in contact with a lot of street people, but then you're also coming in. You got to deal with radio stations and all this. So let's talk about let's talk about the people skills and that you have to be able to navigate all of that stuff. Can you share?
Yeah, well, I back in the 70s and 80s, you know, that is the era when Jay-Z got his label, Cash Money got their label, Rap-A-Lot Records got their label. It was all drug money. And you have to realize that during that period in history, drug dealers were everywhere. Cocaine was like an appetizer, okay? And most of them wanted to get in the entertainment industry, okay? A lot of them got in. I'm not saying that Griffin was a crook or did anything like that, but I've had some dealings with him which weren't fair. I know Gene Griffin was a crook because I worked for Gene. I made Gene, okay? I went and set up his deal. He set up his deal with Gerald Busby. I ran GR Productions and Teddy's operation the whole time that he was in business.
Okay, let's stop right there for 1 second, because we're gonna take it back, because that's a deep story in the book. Because here it is, you have a 10-year run from about 74 to roughly about 83, 84 in the music business, and then there's a rotation, and all of a sudden, you find your way out of the industry, like it normally happens a lot of times with a lot of executives and record people. So now in your book, you say, okay, there's one man who your relationship, now you're back in the industry, and it's Gene Griffin.
I owe Gene for that. Yeah, I owe Gene that. I really do owe Gene that, because I had a bad taste in my mouth from the music business, to be truthful with you. I had basically kicked everybody's behind. I was the #1 label in the world. I had gotten some close relationships with some artists that I shouldn't have. But I never did anything illegal with any artist or management or anybody of that nature. I was never that stupid. And I say that in the book. I was never stupid enough to take money or make commitments to artists. Okay, because those are the most fickle people in the world. But what happened was, after I left the music business, I went to work for Quality Records for a while, and I started working in TV advertisement. And I had moved to Nashville. My family and I was in Nashville. Gene called me and told me he had gotten a deal with MCA Records for Teddy on a group called Guy, and he needed my help.
Can you go back, because you also knew Gene when he had the kids that worked on CBS?
Yeah, I know. Matter of fact, that's true. I am skipping too much. I met Gene while I was at Epic Records. Okay. And Gene brought me Teddy Riley when he was 14 or 15 years old. I fell in love with it right away, signed him to a deal. I gave Teddy and Gene a deal for a label called Sound of New York. And Teddy had a group called Kids at Work. Okay, that was Teddy's group before Guy. Okay, so CBS got rid of me. I left CBS. I started another career, got into something else. Gene calls me, I think it was 3 years later, 3 or 4 years later, and asked me, could I straighten out his deal with, he told me he had a deal with MCA, but at that point, Busby had left MCA and went to Motown.
Okay.
MCA was not happy with Gene. Okay, MCA was not excited about having Gene Griffin label on MCA, because they knew Gene's reputation. So Gene called me and asked me, could I help him get Teddy and them off the ground? And he told me he was having problems with MCA Records since Busby had left. So I asked him who was president of MCA then, and he told me Al Teller, which happened to have been the president of Columbia Records when I was vice president of Epic. I used to kick Al Teller's in the behind. But so I told Gene, I said, oh shit, I know Teller. I said, Teller and I are old friends. So Gene asked me if I could go out to Los Angeles and straighten out this situation with Al Teller and get Guy and them back on the priority list. Because I think when they had Groove Me, the first release, I think that record was like 100,000 units or some shit. Gene told me he'd be happy if he could just do 300,000. He said, man, if we can do 300,000, this will be a success. So I went out, set up a major campaign with Al Teller and to support Teddy Riley and Guy. Came back, moved back to New York, took over vice president of operations, OOP, for Teddy's operation, Teddy Riley and GR Productions. Did all the Guy's releases, did Rex in Effect, Today, all the stuff that Teddy did during that period. I handled all radio promotions and marketing for. And we had a hot run. Gene had made a commitment to me that if I came back and ran the label for him, that I get a point on everything, which I got fucked. You know, he fucked me and Teddy. You know, I just saw Teddy on the interview. I did not realize how bad Gene was fucking Teddy. So I saw this interview that Teddy did for the Breakfast Club a couple of weeks ago. And Teddy was saying that Gene was giving him $10,000 per
remix.
Remix and
production.
Production. Teddy was getting like 200,000 a track, man. So Gene was keeping all the money.
So
he had Teddy on an allowance. He had me on allowance. Now I was fool enough for him to tell me that me and him was going to draw the same page. Bullshit. But anyway, I never got my agreement, never got my points, and I set up 2 labels for him. I set up the GT label. I did Basic Black for him. He took that project and sold it behind my back to Motown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
I said, like I told him, he tried to get me to that as hard as it is to believe. After all of that, years later, when he moved to Atlanta, he tried to get me to come back to work for him. I said, yeah, you know, I can't work for you, man. I said, you know, you couldn't trust me. Because I'd have to fuck you. You know, I mean, it would be no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Gene was a drug dealer, and that was his mentality. I met Gene, though, like I said, he used to hang out with Paris Ely, who used to be my boss. That's how I met him, through Paris. And Gene, at one point, I thought, until we did business together, was a great guy. You know, as a friend, he was cool in the game. He backed me on some stuff that I did that I didn't even know Gene. You know, I had a little showdown with a person that was from the streets of New York that was supposed to have a bad reputation, but I felt like they were taking advantage of me, and as they say in the streets, I wasn't gonna be no punk B. So I confronted this individual, and Gene backed, and I didn't even ask him to. But you know what you got to realize, all snakes see the possibilities. Gene always knew that I was a monster with radio and marketing. Okay. So he befriended me. He used to come over my house, he'd eat over my house all the time. You know, I knew him and his first wife very well. I knew their daughter. As a matter of fact, his daughter and my daughter both named Rochelle. You know, so we had what I thought is a good friendship years before we started doing business together.
Yeah,
now, can you share? Go ahead, Namdi.
No, go ahead, Jerry.
But because you were there like in 2 different periods, because you're there and you're seeing the influx of now it's younger people coming into the music business. Obviously, Teddy and everybody else behind him. But what was it seems like you were able to adapt where maybe other people who were like within your age group, they didn't take to the new wave of younger groups. Can you talk about kids, that?
Man. Yeah, I love kids. I worked with a lot of guys, man. Matter of fact, I say a story in the book there. I had several kids out of the streets that were in gangs and stuff that used to do clubs for me, used to work the streets for me. You know, I mean, one thing, and I guess it was my being in Vietnam, no element scared me. Okay. I'd go in any club, anywhere in New York, in Harlem, hang out, I'd ride the subway at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when everybody would tell me I was crazy to do that. And that's when I was VP of Epic. You know, I love people, you know, and I've never feared being around any kind of person. And I've gotten along with killers. I know several killers that I'm real close with, you know. And I know a lot of those other people with the hook nose that I was real close with, you know, the mafia people. So I never bit my tongue with any man. I mean, I'm like Jay-Z said, I come in the room as me. That's what I do. I come in the room as me. And I don't need to be nobody else but me. I've never had any kind of doubt about what I was capable of doing.
Now tell me this, when you were probably about 40 years old when you started to see the change of the younger groups coming in, were your peers receptive of the younger artists coming in?
Oh, yeah.
Like you were?
Yeah. Music is youth, man. Music is youth, period. I tell any act now, if you try to get a music career started and you're in your 30s, find something else to do. Okay? Yeah, find something else to do. Music, creativity of most of these artists span, man, unless they're like a real genius. Well, Teddy is an exception. Teddy was cutting hit records at 13, 14 years old. You know, all that stuff, Cool Mo D and Wild Wild West and all that stuff, that was Teddy. Teddy did all those tracks. Teddy did I'll Be Sure. Teddy was a monster, man. And he just loved the creative process. And he was a kid. He was 15, 16 years old when he was doing that stuff. Matter of fact, that's one of the reasons why Gene could take advantage of him. He took advantage of me. I was just stupid to the fact I thought Gene would be straight with me, but Teddy was shit, early 20s when he was making all that money. You know,
but you shared a story in your book where even though Teddy was popular amongst young people, Teddy was, even though he's popular, he was making the hits, he wasn't a household name. So when you got him on television to do like an interview, yeah, but you needed to get somebody to endorse him. Talk about this story.
Yeah, well, I had to establish Teddy. Teddy was like an underground, the big underground secret. You know what I mean? Everybody, it was like Kanye West used to be. Okay, everybody in the end knew about Kanye. You know, but anybody else on the outside, you talk about Kanye West, you won't know who the hell is Kanye West. He had never rapped on anything. You know, you go back in his early days, man, almost everything Jay-Z did was Kanye. Everything all these guys did was Kanye West. But there was a period when I wanted Teddy to start getting big bucks. And I needed the endorsement of an established music icon. Okay. And I had a friend of mine that was a producer at Entertainment Tonight. And I was talking to them about doing a special on Teddy Riley. And they said they wouldn't do it unless I could get somebody of the magnetism, you know, a big star, a big icon to endorse his talent. And I went to Gene and told him, I said, I got to get Quincy Jones or somebody like that to endorse Teddy, you know, for us to be able to get this Entertainment Tonight special and show you what Gene do. Gene said, man, nobody wants to talk to Quincy Jones. He's an old man. He's a has-been. I said, man, are you out of your fucking mind? That is the music business. Quincy Jones is and I went to Quincy and asked him to do me a favor and do it, because I knew him from Thriller. I had spent a lot of time with Quincy doing Thriller. Quincy is one of the coolest people in the world, man. I love Quincy. Quincy and Clarence Avon are two people that I just thank God I had a chance to meet them, you know, and be around them. But I got Quincy to do that segment for. Matter of fact, there's a picture of me, Quincy, and Teddy and them in the book. I got Quincy to do that segment for Entertainment Tonight. We got Arsenio Hall. We started getting TV. You know, we had Guy on Arsenio Hall several times. So it made a huge difference. He produced Michael Jackson, produced Boy George, produced James Ingram. I mean, he started producing everybody, you know. So like I say in the book, shit, at one point, Teddy, we would have like 6 to 7 records on the chart at one time.
Wow.
And we were a small little, I think we were really about a 4 or 5 man operation, because I didn't have but 3 men on my staff. But one thing I had though, which a lot of people don't know, I had the ex-vice president of Motown working for me. And I had one of the ex-VPs of Capitol working for me. And that's what we did all of Teddy's promotions and marketing through.
The question I had though is, what was your role when Thriller was out? Was your role at that time to promote it, or what was your
I was vice president of promotions at Epic. That's what my job was to make sure that we got as much out of that project as possible to make sure it was received by the public as best possible. And that's why when we first had our first marketing meeting, when we first listened to Thriller, and they start presenting, the pop department start presenting their marketing plan, I objected, that we had to, I don't care if it was just complimentary, you know what I mean? We had to go around and touch the bases. You may hit a home run in baseball, but you still got to go around and touch the bases. And that's what I wanted to make sure we did with Thriller.
So whose idea was it to bring Billie Jean as the first sort of video?
Michael made all those decisions.
Oh, okay. So he was really business
Michael made all the decisions about the videos. And that is totally his genius, man. That's just totally his genius. He was a full-bred superstar. Not in the fact that he could just sing and dance, but he could coordinate do the dance steps and do the lighting and do the movies and show how he wanted it lit and how he knew his whole concept, He would take advice from people that he kept one thing about him, he didn't keep no fools around him, He kept experts in those fields around him. So he would talk to people and listen to people. And that's what I also stated in the book, is that he was a humble person, as far as captivating and as creative as he was a very humble person, a perfectionist, always dissatisfied with his stuff, always wanted to try to make it better, used to always have delays on his releases because he would never be happy with his stuff, with his material, So, I mean, he was a joy to work with.
But what about the battles you had with trying to get him on MTV? Was that something you had to fight?
That's something I didn't have to handle. Walter Ednikoff, the president of CBS, put his foot down on that and told him if they didn't play Michael, they weren't going to play anybody from CBS. So, MTV was a white video company.
Okay.
They didn't play no black artists, man. When they first came out, MTV didn't play no black artists. Michael was the first one. Michael broke the color barrier for a whole bunch of people.
Wow.
Michael was the first one they ever played.
So who gets from the industry, from the label's point of view, who gets the credit for Thriller being the biggest album in their history? You as the guy in head of promotion?
Everybody taking a bow on that there. Please, come on. And I stated in the book that, I am an arrogant, cocky person, but I ain't stupid enough to say Thriller was a Thriller because of me. I was just a little bitty cog in the wheel. I made sure all the bases were touched. That was my job. My job was to make sure that we did not make any proper moves or any, you can have the best project in the world and put your foot in your mouth and screw it up. The main thing is to not make mistakes. It's just like in a big giant, a championship playoff game. Don't make mistakes. That's the secret of winning.
I mean, by the time Thriller comes out, you've been in the industry, a good, it's up to 20, but how many years had you at
71 and I started in the industry in 71. But you got to realize, I was young, man. I was in my 20s.
Yeah. So, but I was trying to say that because by the time you, about 10, 12,
I was 20. I think I was 20. Let me see. I was 71. I was 20. I was probably about 24, 25, somewhere around there. I was in my prime. I mean, I could bust a rock. You know what I mean? Yeah. I was full of myself and full of, you got to realize when I wrote this book, the boy was just telling me about this the other day. He said, man, you don't know how much people envied and hated you for having Michael Jackson. You got to realize, man, it's like everybody hated the Bulls. They had Michael Jordan. You know, I mean, it's the same thing. And I state that in the book. Don't be mad at me because we had Michael Jackson. You know, there's was nothing I could do about it. The only thing I could do was try to make the best of what I had. If I had that type of artist with that type of caliber, I had to make damn sure everything was done right. You know, no missed appointments, no missed interviews, no tour dates screwed up. No, you know, I mean, and stuff go wrong every day. So my job was to put out fires. If something happened, if somebody didn't get where they were supposed to get them there, you know, do that. I just make sure this stuff did not fall apart.
But did it surprise you and the rest of the team how massive it went? I mean,
hell yeah. Nobody could have expected that, man. Nobody. Even when, I mean, after I'd heard it and thought it was a monster project, how can you think that a project gonna sell 250 million units? And it's beyond that now. How can you imagine that? That's unimaginable. Nobody's ever done that. So it wasn't even in the realm of possibility of your thinking. You know, you were thinking Off the Wall did about 3-4 million by the end, I think. So we're thinking this one might do 10. It might do 10 million. We do 10 million, you know, we're kicking ass. We had done 20 million before the, I think we done 15 to 20 million in almost the second year, by the second year. Did $1 million a month for 15 consecutive months.
So what happens to as a team when that's happening? Can you guys go on vacation, or is it back to the next project?
You keep working. You keep the momentum going. You don't have time to be sitting on your laurels, man. Nobody pulled that record out of the stores. Nobody pulled it off of radio. And Michael was still alive and active. You work it until the last drop of milk. It's like a titty. You squeeze that cow titty until you get every drop of milk possible out of it. There was no laurels. Matter of fact, we were so in the mix of it all, nobody even realized what was happening. You know, I mean, we look up and it's that, but nobody was thinking about this when it was. But once we realized what it was doing, we released 2 singles at a time. We released a single for pop. We released a single for urban. Don't nobody do that.
But then what happens to
strategy?
Go ahead. I was just gonna ask, what happens to your other artists that you're promoting? Because if you've got a big thriller blowing up, what happens?
Promoting. Wait a minute. Don't think that I'm only one leg. I got 2 legs. I have 2 hands. But before Michael got there, we were releasing 18 to 20 records every release period. And I had a staff to handle that. So Michael, being as big as it is, after a while, Michael's on the automatic pilot. You ain't got to babysit that record. You may want to keep up with the movement and how soon you want to release another single, or what you want to do to support it, or maybe if we do this or do another ad here, we can get a couple more 100,000 units out of here, and we get a couple more 100,000 units out of here. But you're doing strategy, but that doesn't stop anything. We still got other releases that we must take care of. I got the Isley Brothers, In Between the Sheets. I got the OJs. I got Teddy Pendergrass. I got Luther Vandross. We're not holding up no releases because we got a monster record.
But what happens pressure-wise on those artists? Do they feel as if, man, we've got to do what Michael does? Or does it...
no. Nobody thought they done shit. Nobody thought they were going to do what Michael did, man. Come on. What do you think? I don't know what you got over there in the UK.
No, because you know what happens? You're on the same label. You think, well, if he could do it, why can't we? We've got the same team supporting us.
Man, please. Don't be stupid. Ain't no artist that stupid, man. They don't think that they have. First of all, when Michael Jackson did Off the Wall and Thriller, he'd been in the music industry for what, 30 years? Since he was 5 or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was 21 when he did Off the Wall. So he had been in the music about 15, 20 years at that point.
Yeah. He'd been in the business 20 years. And you got to realize he'd been building fans since the age of 5. Okay. All of that played a part in how big Thriller was. You couldn't have just brought an artist off the street that had no history, that had a phenomenal album that could have done that. It wouldn't have happened. You had to have the background and the fan base that Michael had in the first place, and then have the skill, the dance set and the choreography and the sceneries and the things that he did to make that what it was.
But did Motown 25 actually make a difference from
It bumped it. It bumped it.
Okay.
It bumped it. The sales went up again when he did that moonwalk. Yeah, the sales boosted again. Yeah. TV, man, always helps. You know, visual art always helps. So it was already selling his behind off, but when he did that, it just kicked it in second gear.
Yeah. Sheldon?
Yeah. So I want to talk about when CBS, because it seemed like you said, CBS had a large market share of Black artists. And because CBS had the infrastructure where a lot of other artists on other labels was only going gold, all these other artists were going platinum. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, CBS had the machine. Now, that's one thing that CBS did do, and I owe them that. They taught me the industry. They taught me the business of the music industry because they had muscle. They had the muscle to get major outlets to put the product in major displays or to put it up. You know, you got to realize we're talking physical product and retail outlets back then. And when you got that type of roster, you can call Target, you can call Walmart, you can call so-and-so and say, look, I want you to buy 1 million of this Michael Jackson. They'll buy it.
Wow.
Because even before Michael, you know, they had REO Speedwagon and Journey and all the other major pop acts. So to have the muscle that they had and then have the talent that they had, because at one point before Sony bought CBS, they had purchased almost every Black label out there. You know, they made an attempt to buy every Black label in the country.
Wow.
George Clinton had a deal with them. Barry White had a deal with them. Gamble and Huff, they did distribute Stax Records in the beginning. CBS used to distribute Stax.
Now you were there, like people. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
go
so
ahead.
they had made it a focus of purchasing small Black labels. That was their focus. They used to do that, and because they had the manpower to make the small labels work. You know, if you just had an A&R department and the artists or had a management, it's just like when Luther came to CBS Records. You know, nobody knew how much. My team knew how big Luther was going to be, because man, you know, as soon as we heard Never Too Much, that was just a monster record. And Luther was a monster voice, but it took the labels and other people some time to realize what a big artist this man was going to be. You know?
Now, were you there at the time where I saw a documentary? It had one of your colleagues on there. His last name was Meadowbrooks, and he was talking about, he was there when you were there in the 70s, and he was telling the story how what happened is some of the Black artists were signed to like Black labels, or they were signed as like Free to Pain or somebody like that. They were signed to like those small labels. And what would happen is that the major labels would come behind them and they would kind of like steal the artists from the labels because they had more money, and they would sign them directly to their label.
And none of that really happened during the time that I was there. I know that most of the stuff that we were getting on the Black labels was through Philly International. That was our major Black label for Epic, you know, because they had 5 or 6 big Black artists. One point they had Lou Ross, you know, they had MSSB, Patti LaBelle, you know, and OJ's, Teddy, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. So I mean, they had a fat roster of Black material. And 95% of all Philly stuff at least went gold.
I mean, and then that's what is amazing about that, to have so much talent, but still have the right space to let them develop and be, because you think when you have all that talent on one label, somebody gets missed out, but they still nurtured and allowed them to grow.
Well, we would never create a traffic jam of our own artists. Okay. We would time that stuff to release where it would not interfere. We'd have setup time on releases, and then we would have another time. Certain projects we would know that we were going to need setup on. We weren't going to need to try to bang through. Some artists were in the development and trying to develop material stage, and other artists we knew we were going to run up the charts right away. So they had a different priority set for my staff and themselves. And we would use different areas of the country to develop different artists. Okay.
Somebody like a Luther Vandross, what was your impression when you first saw him, heard him, and his whole?
Just couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe him. I mean, he had the silkiest voice I've ever heard. One of the best male vocalists I think has ever been. Luther was just a sweetheart, man. I mean, I met Luther long before the deal was done.
Wow.
One of the A&R guys had taken me to meet him because he was on Atlantic Records before we signed him, and Atlantic dropped him like a fool. Thank God. And we picked him up. And when I met him and hung out with him and stuff, I just really didn't realize how deep he was and how much commercials he was doing. Luther used to do all the commercials during the late 70s and stuff, man. He did all of Kentucky Fried Chicken and Pepsi. Anything you hear on TV, that was Luther's voice.
Wow.
And he was making big money doing it too. But when he bought that first release in the office, man, and I heard that Never Too Much, I mean, that first chord, doom, doom, doom. I mean, as soon as you hear that little hook on it, you stuck, And I mean, and on top of that, Luther worked with some of the best musicians. Cannonball Adderley Jr. was his band.
Nat Adderley, yeah.
Yeah, that was his band. That's who he had for his band. It's the with same thing with Sade. Sade's band, man, is just phenomenal. So I mean, you got great musicians and great material. You can't help but be successful.
But as the promoter, when working with someone like Luther, did he, like Michael, have a vision as to how he wanted his music and what he wanted to release? And was that easier, or is it harder when you have an artist that has a vision and you're thinking, well, you may have that vision, but commercially it might not work?
No, we were right on the same page with Luther. Luther brought us his first, and Luther had something about him in his team that a lot of artists would bring the material and let us pick the singles and stuff like that. Luther never asked us to pick his first single. We would always pick his second or his third single on a project. But his first single on each release, Luther picked.
Wow.
Can you tell a story? In your book, you talk about Sade. Now, Sade, UK artist. And you broke Sade in America. So can you tell that story? Because a lot of people think, when they think of Sade now, they think of how big she is, but you were there on the ground floor. Can you tell that story?
Well, Sade was the artist that Epic had ended up with she was signed to a custom label in Europe named Portrait. She was signed to Portrait Records in Europe. And she was very successful in Europe. She had, I think there was double platinum in Europe, but she had not been released in the States. And her type of material was not being played in the States whatsoever. It was the time of disco and hip hop. Hip hop was just beginning to get its legs, and disco was dying. So nobody was playing anything contemporary, but they passed the project around for several months. Nobody could do anything with it. They flew several people over to London to meet with Sade and present her with a marketing program. She turned all of them down. So I volunteered to take the project on. I was in love with the material. I couldn't understand why the rest of the label couldn't hear it, but I heard it. I just thought it was phenomenal material. So I flew to London, met with Sade, and convinced her of my marketing plan. She did not like my marketing plan. She did not like the release that I picked. She basically didn't like any of that. But I convinced her that I knew what the hell I was talking about, and she did not. I told her, I said, you're European. You know nothing about the States. I said, I know what will work in America, and convinced her to do it. So we set a tour together. And released "Hang On to Your Love" with the first release, which she did not like. She did not like "Hang On to Your Love." That was the song that she had written in the beginning of her career. She said back in the 60s or 70s or something, but had just never been released. And I told her, I don't care when you wrote it. I said, that's what's going to work. I said, we're going to need that to introduce you to American radio. We're not going to be able to introduce you to American radio with "Your Love Is King" or "Smooth Operator." They will not accept that, not out of the gate, not out of the gate. So we had to find a way to get them to take a second look at it. And "Hang On to Your Love" is what did it. I ran that up to top 10.
Wow.
And from top 10, then we crossed her over to pop.
At the time, was Anita out? Because they always seem to be complementary sort of rivals. I
don't know if Anita Baker was out or not.
Okay.
Yes, she was. I do remember meeting Anita back during that time. But like I say in the book, man, I didn't care what nobody else had out. I never cared about any other releases. I never checked to see was any press coming out of Whitney Houston or any major act that would interfere with what I was going to do. I knew I was going to get mine. They were the ones that had the word. Okay. I had no doubt in if we set forth a plan of what we wanted to do with a project and the time period in which we wanted to do it in, we did that, period. And that's just the mindset that we had.
For those of us who don't work in the music industry, what happens when you have a track record of being successful, and then all of a sudden you find yourself out of a job? Well, that doesn't seem to make sense to those of us who are not doing
it happens in the music industry all the time. If y'all know about the industry, my man over there shaking his head. Yeah, it happens in the music industry. You're either in the circle or you're not. And the business is so funny. If there's any kind of rumors or anything about you at that time, take L.A. Reid. Where's L.A. Reid? L.A. Reid that made more money for record companies than anybody earthly could think of. But he got caught, he got accused of sexual behavior or, doing something to one of the girls. He was not convicted of anything, but just accused. So he lost his job and he lost his status, but he'll be back. He made so much money for record labels. They're gonna give him another shot.
Okay.
Yeah.
But when you left CBS then, or Epic, did you feel as if, oh my goodness, that's it, it's all over?
Man. I didn't pay no attention to that. I've never been concerned about a job, or what I did. I was mad. I was angry because I got framed, and I was angry that first of all, I had never gotten the recognition that I should have gotten when I was at Epic, and second of all, I was fired from Epic for something that I didn't do. But at that point, I was so disgusted with Epic and the label, even though I loved my time over there. Don't get me wrong. I love my time over there, but I had a bad taste in my mouth about it. And I was basically saying, well, fuck them, and they don't want me over here, fuck them. So like I said in the book, when I left Epic, I had a nice little savings. I screwed off for 6 months or so and started getting back in the industry. I started doing stuff, little light stuff, like working with Rap a Lot, I worked with Tone Loaf on Wild Thing. I worked with J. Mike, what's that?
J. King?
No, J. King on a project. So I started doing a whole bunch of stuff like that, but I was never really concerned about me losing my job. I was kind of concerned how the industry had turned its back on me. You know, that was really more surprising to me than the job, because I had felt like I had some real good friends in the industry that I had worked with for years, and those people are still there. The people that were real, you know what? And I say in the book, I needed that. I needed to be fired because I was an arrogant asshole. I ain't gonna tell no lie. You know, yeah, I was an arrogant asshole. I was real good at what I did, and I did not take prisoners. I didn't take any prisoners. I had no excuses for anybody else. You understand what I'm saying? You know, if you weren't on top of your shit and my label ran over you, so be it. You know, that's just the way that was my attitude. I didn't make a lot of friends, first of all, because I had Michael. Then I messed around and discovered Sade. Then messed around and discovered Teddy Riley. I was just doing too much for people to like me. Okay. And I wasn't humble with it. If I had been humble with it, it probably would have been a different thing. But I left New York and like I said, started doing advertisement, started doing TV. I was pretty happy with it for a while, but that bug, man, soon as Gene Griffin called me and told me, I need you, man, that bug, you know, that music bug is a powerful thing. And I was living pretty good, making good money, but I just love that action. You know, I love that chart action, that competition. You know, that whole synopsis was like, as I say in the book, it was like dope to me.
But on reflection, because I think one of the things that we're trying to use the channel to do is for those of us to learn life lessons. On reflection, would you, if you could go back to yourself in the heyday of Epic,
oh yeah,
what would you have changed about yourself that might have?
I never would have messed around with cocaine, first of all, because everybody was doing that. And I would never have been as arrogant as I was. You know, I was arrogant, and I was not a patient or a person that gave a lot of slack. You know, I fired a lot of people at CBS. Okay. I fired 18 to 20 people when I first got there. I wanted people to produce. Now I ended up with this motherfucker of a staff. You know, my guys were the best in the country. Our track record shows that. But before that time, I took no prisoners. You know, I took no prisoners, man. And that was just my attitude about it. I wanted to be the #1 label in the world, and I made that. You know, I could have been nicer doing it. Okay. But I was just headstrong and just determined, you know, to do things. And another thing that I would change is that, one thing that I'm glad I didn't change is that, and I told my daughters them this when they got their own companies and do their own thing. I said, in the entire time that I worked for every label, worked for ABC, CBS, Epic, Capital, the whole 9 yards, I always emphasized my name. I always emphasized me instead of the label. Okay. And that has saved me.
To make sure that your name is synonymous and they don't just forget you.
Synonymous in success of projects. Yeah. That has saved me, because I mean, as much, and people will tell you this, as much as I've been hated, ain't nobody can say, they'll all say, he's a hell of a record man. A hell of a record man.
But being black in the industry, as an executive, was it more pressure? Is there more pressure? Was there more pressure and more eyes on you because you were black, and the threshold was a lot lower? From, if you make a mistake, that's it. Or
I didn't never feel any of that. I felt that Black Department and Black Division would not get the priority that it needed to have. It didn't get the attention or the budget that we need to have. See, the way that they disrespect you is not give you enough to succeed. You know, they give you enough. Go sit down. Come here, Charlie. I got a big baby shepherd. She thinks come on over here on this side. Come on. Good girl. Good girl. She's about 100 pounds. Come on. She thinks she's a baby, but she's a monster. Okay, I'm trying to do an interview. Sit down now. But that was my only shortfalls with any of them. I always had a fight about advertising budget, marketing budget, and I guess I just accepted that as part of my job. I knew I was going to get screwed. I went in there with the attitude, I know they're going to screw me, So I always was had my guard up about making sure that my guys and my projects and my releases had what we needed to make it successful.
Did you cross
that was my biggest fight throughout my entire career.
Did you cross paths?
Just making sure you had the right tools to do what you needed to do.
Yeah, there's a name that's been synonymous with the industry, especially with Black music in the 80s, was Lowell Salles Jr. And I recently heard an interview with Shante Moore, who said that Lowell was he if he was nicer, he probably would have been a lot more loved and stayed within the role. And that's when you mentioned about how arrogant you were, I just wondered if that sense of, if you were, I think he had the same sort of thing. That's the way Shante described it.
Oh, I know it. I know it. I worked with him. Yeah,
okay.
He used to be at Warner Brothers. Yeah, he was at Warner Brothers before he started managing J-Lo and all these big artists that made all that money. Yeah, he used to be over at.
You're talking Benny Medina.
Oh yeah.
Not about Lowell Salles.
Lowell Salles.
Yeah, I know Lowell Salles too. Yeah, Lowell is wasn't very well liked, but it was basically, he was a great musician. He was good at what he does. He wasn't nice. He wasn't nice. But I know, you know what? See, white guys can get away with it. I mean, I know some guys. My hero, first white boy I saw that was the vice president of Capitol Records, Al Corey, was a monster back in the day. He ran Capitol Records and he was over promotions, but he was an arrogant white boy, man. I mean, I remember first, I talk about him in the book. I mean, first time I met him and saw him at Capitol Records, he came into a meeting late. The president of Capitol and all the other dignitaries were there, and they were all suited up and stuff. Al Curry came in about 30 minutes late with raggedy jeans, a t-shirt, and sneakers on. And everybody applauded because he was kicking behind. Yeah, he was the one that was making Capitol Records and the #1 label back in the day at Pop Radio. Okay, so he was the man. And that's when I first saw him. I said, "Ooh, that's who I want to be right there." He was my hero. Yeah. I didn't know what he did or what his job was, but I knew when he came in the room, all bullshit stopped. Okay.
Okay.
Can you talk about how important maintaining relationships is when you are doing what you're doing as an executive, because it can be very cliquish.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And there's phone calls that can be made and they can just shut you down. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that has basically saved me, because I've always had a great relationship with radio. Some of my best friends now are program directors and PDs and music directors and stuff. And I had, that's who I hung out with. That's who I was, my parties was with the guys at radio, and the other people that I had a relationship with them, and I can still call and get stuff done. that I can get through when other people can't get through. That's one of the reasons why when people still hire me, people answer my phone calls. And it's out of the respect of what I've done and what I'm capable of still doing. I don't, and another thing that I've done, I do not use my friendships with people. I don't call people just to say I know them. I don't call Clarence Avon just to, say, let me get Clarence on the phone, or something like that. I just don't do that kind of stuff. I don't mess with people's lives unless it's actually something that I need or you need, I need to talk to you about or something. Matter of fact, Clarence, I sent him a book. Clarence is, let me do this. Clarence is losing his memory. And I used to call Clarence all the time. Clarence and I got to be real close. That was my boy. Matter of fact, as I said in the book, Clarence was the one that called me and told me that Epic was going to fire me. And
before you knew?
Oh yeah, Clarence was down with everybody, man. Clarence was partners with Walter Yednikoff, who was the president of the label. Clarence called me and said, they're gonna fire your ass. I said, what? He said, I don't know how the fuck they can be firing you. He said, they just celebrated you the week before. They just gave me a big luncheon for something I had done. He said, man, how could they be firing you and you the #1 label? I say, man, I don't know. I thought he was full of shit. But I called Clarence. I spoke to Clarence and his wife the day before she was killed.
Wow, man.
She answered the phone because I used to always call, and I used to just get fun out of talking about Clarence like a dog. I used to just dog him. Told him he was old and black and so and everything. He used to just cuss me out. So we used to have fun doing that, but I'd always call and she'd answer the phone and I'd always say something derogatory about Clarence, which she would just fall out. I said, where that ugly man you married to at? She'd say, oh, Clarence is around here. So she was a sweetheart, man. I just really hated to hear that had happened to her, but she was a beautiful person inward and outward.
Wow.
Matter of fact, they just named a community center or something in Los Angeles after her for her work with the homeless.
Did you ever see the documentary on Netflix about Clarence?
Yeah. He called me and tell me to watch it as soon as possible. His daughter is married to the vice president of Netflix.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's one of the pillars that we hear about. And Jimmy, I always listen to hear from Jimmy and Terry and even LA and Babyface talking about how he was.
Oh, Clarence is the man. He's just a beautiful person and never asked for a dime, nothing. Never asked for a penny.
So then what separated him from Dick Griffin? So, because, you have vets. Is it just his personality because he didn't seem to take
he's a good human being. He's a great person. Oh, please, don't even put him in the same sentence with Dick Griffin, man. Come on. Clarence probably jump out of his skin. Don't mention Clarence in the same breath with Dick Griffin. Dick Griffin, I guess, is good for what he did in Solar Records and whatever accomplishments he made, but he ain't even in the same neighborhood with Clarence.
Yeah. No. So I've interviewed Timmy Gatlin, and he talks about. Yeah. Timmy said he wasn't just going to sign because when Gene gave him the contract and he saw a word called perpetuity, and he was like. He didn't know what that meant, but when he researched, it said forever. It's like, I'm not going to sign this. But then, with Teddy and Aaron, it was almost like, yeah, we'll sign it because we trusted what Gene said. Was Gene a convincing? Because Timmy seemed to, he had his.
Gene had a personality like 100-watt bulb. He was, he was personable. He was immaculately dressed.
Everyone talked about that. He dressed.
Man, I never seen him in the same clothes 2 days. And the whole time I've known him, matter of fact, I never seen him wear the same thing.
They say he could sometimes change twice a day, but they both Damian Hall, Timmy, Babyface, basic black. Everyone would tell you that Gene, you know, he was probably the most immaculate, stylish person I'd ever seen. They credit him for that.
When I first met him, he had a condo up on the north end of New York, way up in the high rent district. Okay, he had a Porsche, Maserati, Mercedes, and something else he had. I know he had 5 cars and a BMW. He had a BMW. And like he used to wear a diamond necklace.
Yeah, they said he had diamonds.
A Mercedes emblem in diamonds. Yeah, he gave that necklace to my wife.
Wow.
I mean, he was the rich and the famous. You know, that show used to be on.
Lifestyle. Yeah.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Yeah. Robin Lee.
Man. Oh yeah, Gene. I mean, Gene played it to the max. I mean, I say in the book, my man got the book. I say in the book, when we first started hanging out with him, me being the stupid that I was and young back in them days, I went along with him on a pickup. I rode with him one night in Harlem, and he picked up his cash from all his spots. Picked up about $250,000 that night in little overnight cases. He just pulled up to some spot, the guy bring the case out, put it in the car, boom. We drive on to the next spot. Boom. He just went around and did his collections.
What were you thinking about when that was happening?
I knew he was a drug dealer.
Okay.
I knew what was happening. I knew he was a drug dealer. I was fascinated. You know, I'd never been around nobody do that kind of shit for a life, man. I was from the country. You know, I've been in New York. I moved to New York, man. And when I first moved to New York City in the late 70s, New York was like Amsterdam. Drugs was everywhere. Okay? They was everywhere. Heroin addicts was nodding out in the middle of the streets.
Wow.
Oh, it was ugly, man. I just had never seen anything like that. You could go to the stores and buy whatever kind of dope you want. And they had a store, I'll never forget this. They had a store on 110th Street in Harlem. I took Ron Banks, because Ron Banks and I used to smoke herb together. So Ron got to town and said, man, I sure would like to get me some good marijuana. So I said, I'm gonna take you to the spot. I took him to this store on 110th, because he asked me, so why are you bringing me to the store? You go in the store, and there'd be a price list of all the different grades of marijuana that they have on the wall. They have up here, Columbia, Tasty, so-and-so, boo. I mean, and they have your prices and everything. And I told him, I said, just look on the wall and pick out what you want. He about to cry. He couldn't believe it.
Wow.
He said, oh my God. He says, is this real? He said, oh yeah. Just right out in the public, man, right out straight. They had them all over the city like that.
Wow, goodness.
Yeah, it was a wild, wild west, man.
When you joined GR Productions, because when I spoke with a lot of the guys in there was a sense that GR Productions was going to be like, we think of Bad Boy or LaFace Records, because you had Abstract. He was on his way. If he hadn't been such a greedy MF, he was on his way. We had label deals with Virgin, Motown, MCA. Okay. Had groups on each one of those labels. I was popping records, man. He was on his way. Deja, Redhead Kingpin.
Redhead Kingpin on Virgin. Yeah. Today had #1 records, man. We were killing.
Yeah,
we were the hottest production company in the country. And I knew it was going to happen, because I had warned Gene. I thought Gene was just stealing from Teddy. I knew he was stealing from Teddy, you know. And I kept telling him, I said, Gene, you got to include Teddy in some of our meetings. You know, Gene and I would have our marketing meetings. We discuss budgets. We discuss what we're going to do here and do that. Teddy was never involved in anything, you know. And I knew Teddy was going to start figuring it out. I said, man, you've got to involve Teddy in what we're doing. I said, you can't. I said, he's making the money for everybody. You can't ignore him. You know what I'm saying? He's paying all the bills but he don't know what's going on. Okay, and Gene just kept him on an allowance.
Was it supposed to be 50-50 with him, Teddy and Gene? Was it?
I'm sure it was. Yeah, it was more like 90-10.
Well, I mean, Timmy Gatlin said when he left Teddy, left Guy, that he was already a millionaire, and he was shocked to think that Teddy had to move back to the projects.
Oh yeah. Teddy was cutting hits for everybody.
Were you on you on Jacked the podcast?
Yes, he was on there.
And you mentioned
for the Spotify. This is the man. Yeah,
yeah, because you mentioned that you probably brought in over 20 million GR Productions.
Oh, easy. Easy. Yeah, easy.
But Teddy didn't have any money. He didn't have his credit card. He didn't have.
Teddy had a credit card, but Gene paid the bill. Teddy had a car. Gene paid the car note. Everything was in GR Productions.
Wow.
So can you tell the story of when you all left New York and you moved to the Berkeley Estates in Gwinnett County near Duluth? Tell that story.
Well, Gene moved everybody down to Atlanta and bought shit. I don't know how he got, but he had at least 4 or 5 mansions that he had purchased. I had one, Teddy had one, Gene had one. My house was so big, it was a block. One block. My house was the block. Okay.
Wow.
4 stories.
Wow.
2 balconies. The whole night. I mean, it was huge. It was just ridiculous, man. But that's when Gene stole Basic Black and Teddy came to his senses. It's in Atlanta.
Okay. Because he brought Basic Black, because we did speak to them and Mucho
I spoke to them the other day. Matter of fact, they were so in the dark. They didn't even know I had put the label together and made that record hot. They thought Gene was doing all that.
Oh, which one was it? Nothing but a party?
Yeah, they said, because I just talked to him about a couple of weeks ago. A friend of mine that works for Sister to Sister magazine. It used to be Sister Sister magazine. I did an interview with Jamie Brown a few weeks ago, and the girl that works with Jamie Brown told me, he said, Basic Black's trying to get in touch with you. I said, Basic Black? Why do you want to get in touch with me? So I called when we get to talking. They had no idea of what was going on. Gene had kept them totally in the dark. Wow. They knew nothing about nothing. They didn't know how to do. I set up the distribution for the label. I had set up everything for them. Matter of fact, Gene screwed not only me, but when we started GR Productions, when we started GT Records with Basic Black, I set up all the distribution with all the independent distributors around the country. Gene screwed them and sold the project out from under them. So naturally, nobody never met Gene. They all blamed me. I'm the one that set up the deals. So I had to go around and kiss everybody's behind and make up and tell them it wasn't me, I'm sorry, but he sold Basic Black out from under.
I mean, there's one thing to take the lion's share, but it felt as if he was setting it up to fail from day one. I mean, was it just his nature? He was just like, I just take it all and eat it all.
That's just him. He's a short end man. He's a short end. You know how some people is, you can say, well, you'll get a percentage on this, this, and this. You say, no, I'd rather have all of mine back. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, because he that group, I mean, he was amazed. He didn't think that was going to be successful. I'm the one that convinced him to do another group, to do Basic Black. I told him, I said, man, if you get me that sound, because I was in Gene's camp. I was all the way in Gene's camp. Should have went with Teddy, okay? But I was in Gene's camp. That's right. I should have went with Teddy, but I was in Gene's camp. I told Gene, I said, look, you get me that sound. You get me that Teddy Riley sound. I'll get it played. I'll make it a hit.
So when they came out with Nothing But a Party?
Yeah, and that's when they came out with that. I got it, made it a hit. He sold it as soon as I turned my back.
So After GR production, after the, Gene's, basically everyone leaves and stuff, what do you decide to do? Do you still decide to you leave Gene finally because you realize, okay, this is.
Yeah, I left. He came back from somewhere or something. I had packed. I was gone. I had another label that signed, had hired me.
And so as you got into the 90s and the music industry is changing and labels and stuff, and do you ever consider yourself thinking, maybe I should start my own label because I know how to do promotion? Why was that?
I don't want to start my own label. I may start my own management company because the one thing that I've realized, I'm more of an artist person than a label person. That has been my thing throughout my career. I just happened to be working for a label.
Oh, but why didn't you think
a label's best interest is not always the artist?
Yeah, but I was thinking about the business side because in the 90s, when as Sheldon was saying it, all these labels were given boutique label deals from Bad Boy to Perspective to LaFace.
They're not doing that anymore.
No, but back then, why didn't you consider like, well, I know everything?
I started a couple of labels and had a little success. I started a couple of labels, but I found that that's not what I wanted to do. I don't want to run a label. I may want to run a management company or do that because I'm talking to some artists about managing them now. But I really just rather be involved in the creativity part of it with the artist, developing the material, and then helping develop it after it's been released. You don't have to have a label to do that.
Yeah. I mean, what are your thoughts about the state of the music industry, but more so for Black music? Because what seems to get the dominant budgets and promotion is trap music and a music that has not a substantial message compared to when you started off, when you're talking about Luther and Teddy Pendergrass and Michael and stuff. So somebody who's been there from those early days to see
that's
now.
what they choose. That's what they choose to do.
Who's they? The labels or the artists?
Artists. Labels don't tell artists what to write. I feel like our demeanor now, our thing that we're in now, the low grade of the information that we're putting out there, it's on the artist. I've never known any label to tell your artist, no, go cut me a booty record. Go cut me a nigger record. Okay? Go cut me this. Okay? Ain't nobody, and my man tells no, they don't want label telling nobody to do that. Labels are in business to make money. If you bring them something that's stupid and calling your women bitches and hoes, and that's what's selling, they don't give a fuck. They in the business of making money. If you want to do that, selling your people out and they can make money at it, hey, amen. So I don't blame the labels for that. The labels doesn't have a conscience. Record labels don't have a conscience. Human beings have conscience. Okay. So when Kanye and Jay-Z, well, Jay-Z don't cut that kind of shit, first of all. When those type of artists cut that type of material, where they talking about hitting it and bitches and all this other shit, if our people run out and buy it, they're gonna sell it. It's as simple as that, man. They did not create the marketplace. We did that. And we so far down the rabbit hole now, it ain't no coming back. Nobody don't want to sing no record. Nobody want to hear a record but old folks about love. Okay? That's why your R&B crowd is over 35. They want to hear about love. But these young women now, they want to sing about, they want to hear about who got the Rolls Royce, who got the Coach, the Gucci, the Louis Vuitton, who can buy me this, who can give me that. We are materialistic we have let, I don't want to say that, but we have let society turn us into hoes. That's my aspect of it.
So, you know, right now, I mean, obviously you've seen everybody wants to be in the music business and everybody wants to be an artist. But when you look at what you've done behind the scenes, is that pathway, does that still exist for people who want to get into the music business, but they don't want to be an artist? They want to do promotions. They want to do all of that. Do those type of jobs still exist the way they did back in your day?
Yeah, absolutely. There's probably a little bit more college requirements than it was when I got in, you know, or some kind of communications degree or something of that nature, or something in IP, something of that nature. But yeah, those positions are still available. Absolutely. They don't have the kind of staffing that they used to have, you know, because music companies don't have as much interest in radio and physical outlets like they used to anymore. It's all right here on this computer. It's all digital.
So TC Thompkins LLC, what if somebody comes, what would you say it represents now if somebody comes?
Well, it depends on what they want me to represent them as. You know, I offer a lot of things to artists, but if you come to me and you want better presence on the internet, we do that. If you come to me, you want to increase your numbers, we do that. You come to me, you want to do a tour, I do that. You want to do radio, I do that. You know, so there are more facets to the development than there were when I first began, because you used to go, I go get radio and go home. You know, that's all that was needed. But now you need a lot more than radio.
Yeah, but how have you been able to keep up with the ever evolving pace of the industry, where you know,
like a lot of people don't do? I read. That's all you got to do is read. The internet is an abundance of information. I mean, when I first got out of the industry, I remember when I bought my first computer, I knew I didn't know nothing about computers. I was going to teach myself. I taught myself about computers. Okay. I bought a cheap computer, and I remember them like, with the internet and the lines, and I did the whole 9 yards, man. I didn't get here just by closing my eyes. I kept myself relevant. That's what you have to do. Keep yourself relevant. And I continued my relationship with radio. I've also built a ton of radio relationships with digital outlets and platforms and things of that nature, and found how these rhythms work and how these things work and what makes people respond to certain things than the other. You know, the whole 9 yards. So it's not that I had to continue my education. That's basically how I've stayed relevant.
If somebody wants to buy your book, what would you describe your book as? And Sheldon, do you want to show it up? If somebody...
Well, it is my life. That's all it really is my life. There's a lot of life lessons in it. There's a ton of interesting stories. There are a lot of things that teach you what not to do, because I did a lot of that. But it is a phenomenal hayride, okay? I can't think of anybody else that's been able to do what I've done with the amount of success that I've had and live to talk about it. Matter of fact, all the artists that I represented on this thing are mostly dead. And I was older than all of them. You know what I'm saying? And that's something, think about that.
But what do you think, though? I mean, without
only
the conspiracy.
Only artists that I have a real history with that's still alive is Sade.
Sade, but she's hardly around. She
finna drop another project.
Yeah, but when she's not done, like she doesn't do anything. She disappears.
No, she doesn't do interviews. She doesn't do anything. No, perfect.
But for the black artists,
that
have passed suddenly, you know, no, from us, you know, fans of Michael or Whitney and stuff would assume that they they either needed to take his publishing or they didn't. They thought, you know, Whitney was more valuable. They're more valuable dead than they're alive.
Of course.
You know, we can only speculate as fans, but is there a possibility that there are people within the industry that would?
Man, please, come on. What are you asking me? Will people kill other people for money? Is that what you're asking me? I mean, if that's what you're asking, I can't believe that you got a podcast for that, because that's the dumbest question I ever heard in my life. Will people kill other people for money? Let me think about that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hey guys, look, it's been great, but it's been 50 some minutes.
Yeah, no, we're finished. That's why I wanted to see, where can we get so
you can get the book everywhere, but I would prefer you getting it from whenradiowasking.net. That's my website. You can get the ebook there. You can get the printed copy there. I'm working on the audio book next week, but it is available at Barnes and Noble, Apple, Kindle, everywhere. So, you know, that's the only thing I don't have right now is an audio book, but I'll get that done.
Before we go, we always ask our guests that if you, what is your favorite movie of all time? Just your favorite movie.
I don't know, man. Jesus, I got so many. Goodfellas.
Goodfellas, okay. And then the final one is your all-time favorite
my
song.
boss, Frank DeLeo's in that movie.
Is that Michael Jackson's former manager?
Yes, manager.
Cigar?
Yeah,
that's
okay.
Right. That was my ex-boss, vice president of Epic Records.
Okay, and the final question is always, what was your favorite all-time song?
Oh my God, I don't know about that. I got so many. I mean, I love all kind of music.
Yeah, but I mean, there's that. Mine is Michael Jackson's "The Lady in My Life," but everyone has that.
Well, it would probably be something by Aretha Franklin, because that was my youth, was Aretha Franklin. You know, I love all Aretha stuff. I don't know, Angel by Aretha.
That's a good song. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think her sister wrote that. That's a good record. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my wife's favorite record. That's probably why. And I like Ella James and shit, you know.
Yeah.
Sunday Kind of Love. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate your time, sir. It's been a really fascinating journey, and definitely when Radio is King, we're making sure that people will put the link in the description so people can go straight to the website.
I appreciate you guys having me. It's been a ball. Okay. I did have to use some profanity a couple of times. I've been trying to stop that.
That's okay. I'm gonna tell you, I was excited. I was really excited to go ahead and get you on because, you know, a lot of times we don't get these stories that people pass away. So I'm very happy for you. And then I got your other colleague. I got his name mixed up. His name is Logan Westbrook.
Oh yeah, I know Logan.
Yeah, right. He wrote some books as well about that whole Harvard report. The whole when you were there. So I'm very excited that you wrote the book and you sharing your history. And it's important for a lot of young people to understand is that everything didn't begin with them. There was some people who were doing this before, the same cycle, the same experiences. You know, so I'm grateful.
I'm gonna leave with this one. I had an interview with iHeartMedia a couple of weeks ago. And the host of iHeartMedia started thinking about it. And he said, you know what? If you hadn't been where you were, when you were, Biggie Small would have never had his record off of In Between the Sheets. And none of hip hop would have had any of Juicy Fruit. The Juicy Fruit, In Between the Sheets, and Never Too Much are three of the most used tracks in hip hop.
All CBS, yes.
All
Epic
CBS,
and all of that.
all my stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thompkins. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Take care, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, guys, Cheryl, what are your thoughts about speaking to Mr. T.C. Thompson?
It was great. I mean, really, really, because, you know, when I heard that name, the first time I heard it was off of Jack. Jacked, the Spotify.
Is that how you
piece.
first? Okay.
Yes, right. So I heard the name, and I heard him when he was talking about Teddy and Gene needed to pay Teddy. And then I was on Facebook, and Mr. Thompkins had posted a book. And as soon as he posted it, I said, I gotta get it because I know the stories is in there. And the rest is history. The rest is his story,
Wow.
So really, really good, really good.
So you've read the book. What is there? I mean, how much more does he dive into some of his backstory?
His backstory is really expensive. Really, the thing that really was interesting to me when he talks about the kind of work that those guys had to put in terms of being, the record executives, marketing, promotions, and he lived very well. He made a lot of money, and like you said, it was a lot of the parties and the drugs and everything or whatever. But it was the type of situation where if you were in the music business at that time period, it was a status situation. It was major because, you were working these records and you're building your reputation and, so a lot of great stories. And he has the stories broken up into like small narrative pieces. So when you read the book, he kind of talks about certain type of things and then he moves on to the next thing. So it's not like a long drawn out biography. It's broken down in really manageable bits. And some of the high points that I pulled out of the book, he answered those questions. But I think anybody that's interested in knowing what it was like in the music business in that time, because what we know about the music business now is all over social media and everything. This is a great biographical tool, reference point, so that also if they're in the business, they know what to do to kind of pivot and not make the mistakes a lot of artists did. So very good. But though he's a guy. He broke Michael Jackson, he broke Sade. I mean, what else is left to say?
Yeah. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed the insight and interview, and I apologize for the first, but he was very old school in his conversations and stuff. But definitely on to next time, guys.
I